How is everyone doing today? Welcome to my channel. We do educational videos and we try to inform you of great theories and great information that you probably have never heard of before. But if you had, it might change your whole life, change your perspective about things. Important core earth-shattering discoveries. And we've been doing a lot of Bible decodes from the New Testament, mostly forwarding the Flavian, or at least the Roman origins hypothesis for the New Testament, that the New Testament was written in whole or in part by the Romans, the Caesars, as part of a psychological operation in general against the Jews. And so the whole story about Jesus is fiction, and this can be demonstrated in a number of different ways. We're bringing on this book called Christianity's Origin as a Flavian Secrecy Cult by Michael Menasgotz, Menasgotz. Just came out within the last year, and he is the latest in a long line of scholars who have put out books on the Roman origins hypothesis. And the basic idea is that the Gospels and possibly the epistles and Revelation were written by the Flavians. That is the dynasty of Caesars that encompassed Emperor Vespasian and his two sons, Emperors Titus and Domitian, from 69 until 96 AD, which is exactly the time that the Gospels were written, according to historians. And they told the story of Jesus, but backdated it by about 4 decades, and set him in the early 30s AD for his ministry. At the same time, they wrote a history of the war between the Romans and the Jews that occurred from 66 to 73 AD. Both Vespasian and Titus are protagonists in this story because they were both military commanders for the Romans in the siege of Jerusalem, after some Jewish zealots had basically chased out the Herod puppet kings, chased them back to Rome. Emperor Nero then brought in General Vespasian to put down the revolt. Eventually, Vespasian becomes the new emperor, and he appoints his son Titus for the military command. So both Vespasian and Titus are in there for 3+ years. And Titus was pretty much the guy who oversaw the complete annihilation of Jerusalem. And there are many patterns. If you look at both of the works of this history called War of the Jews, and it was written under the name of Flavius Josephus. Josephus was said to have been a Jewish military commander who was captured by Vespasian, and at that point recognized that God now favors the Romans and not the Jews, and so he defected to the Romans, predicted that Vespasian would someday become emperor. When Vespasian did become emperor, he pardoned Josephus, brought him to Rome, made him one of the court historians, and gave him a townhouse at Caesar's palace, and adopted him as a member of his family. So he is now known as Flavius Josephus. Now, if you believe that, I think that's a crazy story that has very, very little chance of being true, and that Josephus was just a pen name of some other, maybe an entire team of scholars or a group of people, or possibly the family of Arius Piso, who was a kind of a shadow character within the Flavian court. Not sure. But whoever Josephus was, Josephus is also the person or people who wrote the New Testament or the Gospels. Because if you look at them, you see unmistakable parallels between the two. They are paralleling each other, parodying each other, bouncing back and forth almost as if they're having a conversation at points. One set of parallels concerns the 3-year ministry of Jesus in Judea and the 3-year military campaign of Titus in Judea. And every single place that Titus goes during his military campaign, Jesus also goes. And they go there in the same order. And the events that transpire in Titus's military campaign are corresponded by parallel events, conceptually parallel, or the same type of events occur to Jesus. And the events are offset by 40 years. They are 40 years, sometimes to the hour, apart. And this is not just a couple of events. We're talking about over 40 events, all in the same order in both books, with parallel content and identical locations and synchronicities. But that's just one set of parallels. Now, what Michael Menasgotz does is he looks in particular to the book of Luke and looks for parallels between Jewish war by Josephus, Flavius Josephus, and the book of Luke, and he found over 250 parallels, and he's gone over all of them in this book. We're reaching the end of this book, but you know, if you watch any of my 150 previous videos, there'll be discussion of going over some of these parallels that he documents. Some of them are brilliant genius, where there are tightly interwoven parallels of way beyond the realm of coincidence. But then some of them are also rather trivial and could be easily dismissed as coincidental when just seen alone. But when you see all 250 of them presented, it's very, very difficult to even pretend to claim that there's no, intention involved. Moreover, Menasgotz charts all of these parallels, puts them on a graph. The book of Luke on the vertical axis, War of the Jews on the horizontal axis. Wherever he finds a parallel, he puts a dot at the corresponding location. And after plotting all 250 of these points, he has formed 5 near-perfect letters in Latin, APTVS. Titus Vespasian would be the TVS, and then the AP is a little bit up for grabs. I would say Arius Piso, or Agia Numa. that means Holy Spirit, so that would be Father, Son, Holy Spirit, or Aries Piso being the shadow player within the court of the Flavians. Not sure, but the main point is that not only did the Romans write the book of Luke, but they literally signed their name to it, or at least put their initials on it. In Latin, the language of the Roman Caesars. The New Testament is written in Greek, the language of the common language of Rome. Unlike Judea, which was an Aramaic-speaking place, would have been written in Hebrew or Aramaic. Very few people had Greek there in Judea. The Romans also had a monopoly over censorship, publishing, and distribution. The Romans had a very clear motive here, which was to mellow out the Jews. The Jews had been a major thorn in their side for over 100 years since the Romans took over in Judea, and one revolt after another, after an uprising, after a riot, after a war. And the war from 66 to 73 was the last straw for Titus and Vespasian. And they decided to go into their bag of psychological operation tricks. So they took advantage of the fact that they knew that the Jews were waiting for a Messiah, and that even several candidates for a Messiah had emerged in the original uprising for this war. And they attempted to prune that, or to cut it back, to tame or domesticate the Jews by proposing a Jewish Messiah who was a Prince of Peace and who believed in rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar, and walking an extra mile with the Roman soldiers' pack and turning the other cheek to oppression. And this was right down the alley of the MO of the Romans. They made many religions, created many religions in the first century there, including Rabbinic Judaism, which was a psyop on a different group of Jews, not the Zealots, but the Pharisees. And so, the Romans have all the motive, the means, and the opportunity, but then there are so many examples of their plan in evidence, in print, of the book of Luke in particular, but the Gospels in general, and the New Testament in general, and War of the Jews by Josephus. Menasgotz is kind of talking about why this is important, as if that even needs to be said. First of all, it's important because this is the most populous religion in the entire world, and it's being shown to be a fraud. Not only that, but possibly the world's most famous historian is also being shown to be a fraud as Flavius Josephus. Possibly the most read book other than the Bible in history. Although Josephus has many different books, like War of the Jews is 7 volumes, but later on he did Antiquities of the Jews, which is 20 volumes, and that is where the Testimonium is, which is where Josephus actually corroborates the existence of Jesus by referring to Jesus in an offhanded paragraph that Joseph Atwill shows is part of the code and part of the puzzle. The Romans were masters of enigma and riddle and pun and fake names and just all manner of word games. That was entertainment to them. And then they also loved the fact that they could ridicule the Jews and trick the Jews into worshiping them. In particular, that was important to Titus. Okay, so reason why these discoveries matter. One reason it matters has to do with the historicity of Josephus Flavius, which Jewish War states was its author, and whose utterly implausible life story is generally accepted by most modern historians as fact. By showing the APTVS pattern is real, and that so many of its parallels involved Flavius Josephus' entire autobiographical life story being a carefully concealed parody of Jesus, it follows that Josephus Flavius is fictional and merely a piece of government propaganda. Josephus' name, originally Joseph Matthias, is both a pen name of, pun on, and indeed a Hebrew anagram of one of the Flavian emperors who authorized the production of the surviving version of War of the Jews, Emperor Titus, who was apparently to be worshipped by the name Ares Piso Titus. I'm not completely tracking with that. Josephus is also in that name, Joseph Matthias. That is also, as Atwill has pointed out, the author of Caesar's Messiah, that is related to Joseph of Arimathea, the wealthy guy who puts Jesus in his tomb, takes Jesus down from the cross. And in War of the Jews, Josephus does the same thing. He sees three what are those called? Storoses, the crosses. Three of his friends were being crucified. This is when he was traveling with Titus. And he asked Titus to stop, and so he could take his friends down from being crucified, and he took them down, but only one survived. Three were crucified, one survived. And so that's part of the set of parallels between the Gospels and Josephus. They, Joseph Matthias took down three from the cross, only one survived. Joseph of Arimathea does the same. Okay. The upshot of this is huge. The whole concept that the Romans were expert strategists in everything except propaganda comes crashing down with the realization that their propaganda was so subtle and effective that modern historians have been taken in by it. Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that Josephus is still accepted as a realistic historian, because if you read it, there's so much in there that's not believable. Okay, this matters because our sense of who we are is based in large part on our understanding of history. And it turns out we have been accepting government propaganda narratives as honest descriptions of that history. The idea that the Romans persecuted the early Christians, even mainstream modern historians are now looking back at that as not as lacking adequate evidence. I'm sorry, I took a bad photograph there and I couldn't quite see the last line of that page. Let's try to move on to the next page, if possible. Don't think this is it. Sorry about that. Just please hold for processing. I'm trying to get onto the right page. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna get it. Okay. A more subtly corrosive example is the idea that society has generally had a fair degree of socioeconomic mobility. For example, Tacitus claims that Emperor Vespasian rose to the throne despite being of relatively humble origins. But this is contradicted by the observation that the secrecy cults were to be told that Titus was to be worshipped as Ares Piso Titus, and thus claims to be descended from the powerful and royal Piso lineage. If the Roman government found it so easy to deceive people into thinking that there was greater social mobility than was actually the case, what reason is there a similar lie hasn't been peddled by successive governments for centuries? But the wider point I am making is that we don't even know in what other ways an incorrect understanding of our history might be distorting our identity, beliefs, principles, and actions. But there is an opportunity here. By observing that Josephus, Tacitus, and Pliny the Younger promote government propaganda narratives while going to great lengths to seem independent, we can start to identify other writers who promote matching false narratives, enabling us to start unpacking unpicking, he says. I think he means unpacking. What false beliefs have been foisted on us. And this is a lot of the work of Roman Piso and the Piso Project. I disagree with a lot of the things that they come up with, but Roman Piso is kind of trying to revolutionize ancient history by really recognizing that everything that was written back then was propaganda. Maybe even not back then, but that's what he focuses on, is back then. That everything was written by the royal families. And, they might have used a lot of different alias names, fake identities, but all of it was coming from the inner court of the royal families. Okay. Another reason it matters is that over 1 billion people are being taught that they will endure an eternity of torture in hell if they fail to conform, or in some cases, even if their thoughts are too impure. It teaches them that their actions and needs in this world are of little importance given the infinite life in heaven being promised. It makes people see this world's problems, whether that is climate change or social inequality. I can't believe in really either of those two things very, very much, but definitely not the climate change, but we'll just move on. The social inequality is maybe, it exists, but it's different than what they think it is. Whatever line he's coming from here, whether that is climate change or social inequality, as of secondary importance, and to nurture their willingness to accept systemic inequality and to see kings and dictators as put there by God. Seeing everything as being put there by God. And, this whole unit that I'm doing here on this channel, the Reciprocal Church, it's a parachute that enables you to bail out of all of the Western religions, which are all collapsing, not just Christianity. And I would even go as far to say as Christianity is the best of the 5 religions that are about to crash and burn, along with Judaism, along with Islam, along with Satanism, and along with scientism or atheism. It seems like maybe the author here has a little bit of a trace of scientism if he's believing in climate change. I mean, I believe in climate change, but not human-caused climate change. Okay, it encourages acceptance of not only political leaders, but their religion-justified wars, and thereby facilitates war itself. Thanks to its vague wording, it has allowed some groups to interpret the Bible as indicating that ill health is the result of sin, faith as the solution to all problems, the world as a battleground of righteousness and non-believers, or even that they should strive for a world-ending conflict. I don't really necessarily reject the idea of God, but just the idea of God as written down in these books. The Old Testament God is clearly God with a small g. Elohim, Yahweh Elohim. That's the name of the person. It's translated as God, but it's not a God. It's a person. Maybe a highly advanced person, technologically advanced person. I mean, person doesn't necessarily have to be human, but just a personality, an entity. The emphasis on tolerance of oppression and poverty being a virtue helps Western governments get away with offering a bare minimum, democracy and weak social security, and helps some other states get away with totalitarianism. It leads believers to nurture the strength of their faith by practicing the art of rejecting inconvenient evidence. The resulting anti-science movement has led to a large demographic enthusiastically rejecting even the most incontrovertible evidence, be it well-documented election results, vaccines being vastly safer than what they protect us from, the Holocaust, climate change, or even the shape of planet Earth. This person is obvious, Menasgotz is obviously in this cult of science. If you believe in any of this stuff, it's no different than believing in Jesus or believing in God with a capital G from the New Testament. He's just well-documented election results, vaccines being vastly safer. So it's like he is not applying any of his lessons. Who do you think are making the vaccines, and who do you think are counting the election results? It's these same governments that you're talking about in the book. It's these conspiratorial psychological operations. How can you see it in one field and completely miss it in another? I suspect that the APTVS pattern has been discovered before, perhaps multiple times, but until recently, anyone talking about it would have been silenced, or depending on the century, executed. I am thankful that in Western countries we now have a more liberal society, liberal with a small l, a modicum of democracy, and most importantly, the right to freedom of speech. I share this information not to attack Christians, but to show them that they are being lied to, used, and controlled. There is no polite way to tell someone that their religion originates not from God, but from a family of dictators whose purpose was to control the thoughts and actions of the masses. But it is nonetheless the right thing to do. Yeah, I agree, although I don't think it's the end of the world for Christians or for any, I mean, it's just a need for a recalibration of, this is not a rejection of God. What is in your heart, your experience of, whether it's, you call it Jesus, whatever you want to call it, the experience of the reverence and of the divine in your heart is real and it's valid. It's just the names that you're putting on it and the backstory or the mythology that you're applying to it, and even thinking that it's actually a true history. But to get into all the scientism is just crazy. To believe like election results and to believe that vaccines are, the bee's knees. These things are coming from the same governments that gave you the Gospels. So anyway, that is the end of the book. It goes on to Appendix 1, and these are other parallels that help form the APTVS pattern. So there are a lot of the parallels that he put into the appendix because they're not interesting, they're not as interesting as many of the other parallels, and they're more trivial, not as well put together. Some of them probably could be fairly interesting, but not like overpowering like some of the, out of the 250, there were probably a dozen of them that were like overpowering. And then there were 150 of them that were pretty interesting. And then there were 100 of them that were trivial. And I mean, that's just the total estimate. But the book is definitely worth reading. I might skip reading that last page. I do wish he would have formatted it a little bit differently, and it's incredibly long and difficult to read. The print is very light and small, these are all just quibbles. The book is, I would say, like pretty much very, very important because it's like literally smoking gun proof that the New Testament was created by the Romans, or the Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels. We'll just say the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, were created by the Romans, and they literally signed their name on it. And they used